Hello everyone, my name is Pat and welcome back to CryptoLiveLeak. I'm here with Sanjib Kalita, CEO of Guppy, to talk about their plans to talk about credit reporting agencies and their plans to help revolutionize consumer data reporting and give consumers stake in their own credit. Welcome, Sanjib.
Thank you very much.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about your project?
Sure. So what we're building with Guppy is a decentralized, a blockchain-based credit bureau, so that consumers and banks, the actual data owners, can control how their data is used, who has access to it, and for what purpose, and as well as monetize their data.
Tell us why. So, can you talk kind of how you're going to help consumers take own stake in their own kind of credit ratings and the credit reporting system as it is currently constituted?
Yeah, so the way that it currently works is that banks send the data to the bureaus, and at that point, the banks lose control of it, and consumers have never had control of it. What we're building is that once a bank puts their system onto Guppy, the consumer gets messaged, and they can easily dispute it or verify it, and that gets tracked on the blockchain. And then on the flip side, when a lender wants to look up your data, they can look at that data and see if it has been verified by that consumer, giving additional a sense of confidence in that data. And additionally, there's also sort of some messaging there as well too, in terms of if I as a consumer am conscious enough about my data, that's probably a good sign for in terms of being maybe a potentially better credit risk as well too.
So concerning credit, I'm a consumer. We're all consumers. So let's say I fall on, some tough financial times. I miss one of my student loan payments. Can you just explain kind of the current process of credit reporting and how that would negatively affect me?
Sure. So I worked at Citibank in credit cards for 9 years, and I used to listen in on customer service calls just to see how we were doing and what was happening on the front lines. And actually, one of the most disturbing things for me was that learning that so many of these calls when people ran into some problems was after they had some kind of health issue, and then they couldn't go to work. So then their revenues were impacted. They didn't have the paychecks coming in. And so not only do you have, the healthcare bills, but you don't have the means to pay off those healthcare bills. So, at that point, you're really caught between a rock and a hard place. You have the debt from your credit cards or from the hospitals, and then that is being placed as bad history on your credit bureau report. In the meantime, you have the life that you're trying to deal with, and so it's actually a system that is it's really tough for an everyday consumer to deal with, and according to the law, the bureaus only have to provide their data to the consumer once a year. And you think about how many credit card bills do you pay, how many financial transactions do you do, and that in itself is really hard to keep track of. And so what we're doing is we're building a system where it's convenient and you have free access to it. In fact, you will earn money off your data, as opposed to being placed in a situation where you're getting knocked every time you do that.
When you reference earning money off your data, does that mean that, so does Guppy, you intend to launch a native coin, correct?
That's correct. And the way that we look at it is that on the front end, when you set up your account and you can set up who has access to your data, how it's used, and for what purpose. And on the flip side, when the data is actually used, that coin is actually a great security mechanism and a way to audit and track who has accessed that data and when, So I think that's why that blockchain, we believe, and that token specifically, is a great way to reinforce the security in the system.
So a question on kind of the monetization aspect of it. So I set my controls. Does Guppy intend to keep all of my consumer credit reporting information private within my controls and my security keys? So let's say, am I allowed to say, okay, you're allowed to provide this information to third parties? And if so, you sell my information, does that mean I'm rewarded with your token or some kind of incentive?
Absolutely. It is. You as a consumer would be able to set the parameters. So you could say, no one has access to it except myself, or you can make it widely available, as broadly available as possible, and obviously somewhere in the middle as well too. And so when someone purchases your data, that comes onto our platform, and the majority of the way we envision the system is that the majority of the revenue will be going to the actual data owners, and we'd only take a small portion of that.
And how frequent would you say kind of the dividends pay out, potentially? Is it like quarterly, once a year? Or?
No, that's a great question. So if I took a look at some statistics from a couple of years ago, and not everyone has their credit data purchased, but I'd say about 59, at least the data I saw was about 60% of consumers have their data purchased by someone, and the funny thing is none of us know about that, and so 60% get purchased, and additionally, as you can imagine, a lender is probably looking for consumers that have that are prime customers that are good credit risks. So I think the better a customer you are, the more likely you are to have your data purchased multiple times, and it could be many, many times. And once again, the volume is quite large, because there are millions of emails, millions of direct mail pieces that go out every month, and pretty much all of those have some aspect of credit data being used in there.
Awesome. Okay, just to kind of transition a little bit within the framework of the current system and how you're working to change it and how Guppy's working to change it. You talked a lot about engaging with banks. You said that 3 of the 5 largest domestic banks in the United States have reached out to you personally. I'm not allowed to discuss names here because it's still all pending for disclosure agreements. But how is Guppy reaching out to these banks to kind of change the status quo of how, credit's currently reported, to clean up data spillages? Obviously one of the largest data breaches happened last year with, I believe it was Equifax, the credit reporting agency. So how is Guppy engaging the banks to change how credit reporting is currently constituted?
Sure, great question. I think that the conversations I've had with the banks have, I'd say, fallen into 3 major buckets. There's one bucket where it's a bit of a customer partnership play. The banks have, they don't necessarily have the best brand image in the economy, and I think by being able to provide better access to their financial data and helping empower customers, that's a way for a bank to be viewed as a customer partner, and helps their branding. And actually on the flip side, when customers have bad credit data, credit report histories or issues, that hurts the bank brand as well too. So it's sort of, we're trying to remove the bad and inject a bit of good in that scenario. Another major scenario is fraud, and there's something called synthetic identity fraud, where nowadays you get fraudsters will take bits and pieces of other people's identity, stitch them together, and basically that has become a pretty major fraud category, and so something like Guppy could help combat that as well too.
Also, with respect to the large banks, in our conversations previously, we were talking about kind of how smaller banks are disproportionately affected within the current system. Can you talk about how Guppy's kind of working to bridge that gap?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that too has been a surprise for us. The big banks have teams of hundreds, if not thousands, of analysts and data technicians that can take some of the bad data that they're getting and help clean that up. But the small banks, they don't have those resources. So whatever data they get, that's the data that they use, and so they're using more often than the big banks, they're using bad data. Additionally, they're paying more for their data too. And finally, their customer base is, they also have less capital typically. So all of these losses hurt them disproportionately more so. So I think that the small banks, the conversations actually have been really quite poignant, and I think there's even more of an impetus. Like we want this to be ready right now.
Okay, so as far as ready, I'm ready right now. Can you just kind of speak to me as far as the development of your current blockchain system and platform, and when do you believe that it's going to be kind of fully operational?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So we are. We've actually been working on this for quite a while, and we're within a month of being able to start sort of hitting the blockchain with real data. And at that point, we've actually gotten verbal commitments from several banks as well as other financial institutions to start testing. So we anticipate doing that through the course of, through the remainder of the year. And then, hopefully early next year, we'll be able to start, full-scale commercial launch.
Once again, thank you so much for your time, Sanjib. I appreciate it. This is the CEO of Guppy. I'm Pat for CryptoLiveLeak. Pay attention for Guppy streamlining the consumer credit reporting and putting the stake back in your credit. Thank you.
Thank you.